we're kicking things off today with a look at Godzilla. So, Drew, what's that all about, in case you somehow haven't heard of Godzilla?
In case Godzilla is a mystery to you.
Yes.
As big as a gorilla, according to some. As big as a whale, like the B-52's car, according to others.
Oh my God. Are we adopting these tangents this early now?
This isn't even about Godzilla.
And it's about to set sail. Oh, God. Welcome to the Love Shack podcast. Oh, dear. Sorry, man.
Yes, according to, as big as a whale, like the B-52's car, according to others, the identity of the stagehand, or Toho Publicity Department employee, according to director Ishiro Honda, whose immense size created a portmanteau of gorilla, and Kujira whale, may be lost to time, but not the monster whose name he inspired, Gojira, anglicised, of course, to Godzilla. The legendary sea beastie, or gorilla whale, which is really what Godzilla means, which is weird, has appeared in more than 30 films, as well as TV series, comics, and even a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which was terrible, naturally.
How very dare you.
Also, have I offended your love for Godzuki?
Yes, you have. We can talk about that in a bit. Carry on.
However, it all began in 1954 with Ishiro Honda's Gojira, made just 9 years after the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the immense destructive capability of which, along with the terrifying long-term invisible effects, are bound to have an effect on a country. As for the film, 3 Japanese vessels are lost at sea, with few survivors. Then fishing hauls begin to disappear. Really, something funny is going on in the waters around Japan. Just what that is discovered soon after, when the island of Odo, which is not a shape-shifting island, is attacked by a radioactive dinosaur. An ancient creature disturbed from its slumber by United States undersea hydrogen bomb testing. The survivors flee to Tokyo, demanding help from the government, and in the meantime, vessels continue to be lost, and all attempts to harm the creature with depth charges fail. Eventually, the giant chewits-loving reptile arrives in the Japanese capital, emerging from Tokyo Bay and laying waste to part of the city. All attempts to defeat it are fruitless, from tanks and machine guns to missiles, and even an enormous electric fence. While one prominent scientist pleads with the authorities not to attack Godzilla but rather to study it and learn how it survives such a massive dose of radiation, his protege must deal with the moral quandary of his discovery, a device that will certainly neutralise the beastie's threat and save what is left of the city, but will inevitably turn into yet another uncontrollable weapon by those no-good bloody humans. For a monster movie, there's not actually a great deal of monster on show here. And it's not, I think, particularly surprising that the effects work of a 1954 film with a budget of only around $1 million doesn't hold up particularly well today. Though, to be fair to Toho's first outing, at no point does the titular monster look anywhere near as goofy as the googly-eyed initial incarnation from 2016 Shin Godzilla. But for a man in a big rubber suit, it's not actually awful, and it's aided by Honda's sparing use of the creature. Later entries in the series may have demanded plenty of monster action, but in the original neither the characters nor the audience knew what Godzilla was, so both were on a journey of discovery. Rather, it's the model shots that have withstood the test of time particularly poorly. Well, I say model shots. Toys. They're toys. Particularly the mangled helicopter and the trains. Sound design, though, can go a long way in papering over cracks, and so it is here. Godzilla's roar is organic but alien, and would definitely put the right up you if you heard it in real life. But beyond the iconic creature, what stands out in Godzilla are the themes. There's a film paper, or 10, that could be written about the differences between the original Japanese Godzilla and US adaptations, especially in this first film. Godzilla represents the dangers of the nuclear age, particularly the incomprehensible destructive power of nuclear weapons. It is unstoppable, uncontrollable and life-threatening, a genie well and truly out of the bottle. In contrast, US takes, if they referenced atomic bombs at all, did so sparingly, and saw Godzilla become a weapon, dangerous certainly, but a necessary evil against other aggressors. No subtext there at all, no siree. The Japanese-produced films changed tack eventually, turning Godzilla into a hero and pitting it against other monsters, which is undeniably better if what you want to make is a monster movie. But if you want to actually say something, as it seemed Honda and the studio Toho did in the mid-1950s, then this is clearly a far better way to do it, though a touch more subtlety than walking H-bomb might have been nice. The earnestness of the film, and its very on-the-nose themes and metaphors, remove some of the watchability from it, at least for me, but it's a fascinating insight into the psyche of a nation and of the overriding and entirely legitimate fears felt by its populace. It's best to consider it apart from most of the sequels, with the exception of 2016 Shin Godzilla, which updated this film's central allegory from nuclear weapons to nuclear power in the wake of the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, especially as it's what is left in Godzilla's wake, burning cities and irradiated children, that is the true driver of emotion here. Long before James Cameron was making films, it was Godzilla and what Godzilla represented that truly was a force that can't be reasoned with, can't be bargained with, that it doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and that absolutely will not stop, ever, until you are dead. If you like your monster movies with a heavy dose of introspection, existential fear and post-war commentary, then this is the monster movie for you.
I prefer giant moths. Can it deliver any of that?
No.
What can you recommend me?
Missing. You're going to have to jump forward a decade or so if you want your giant moths, I'm afraid. And also your giant pteranodons, your giant ankylosaurs, your giant robot lizards.
Mm-hmm.
No,
in the best entry.
Yeah, it's just, it's not quite the same in the 1950s, I'm afraid. They hadn't really fleshed out that universe yet. The Godzilla cinematic universe.
Yes, Godzilla is fun in a very kind of bleak way. It's primarily... I'm pretty sure I must have seen this Godzilla, but a lot of the Toho stuff from this era has kind of run into each other, and I only really remember the big, silly men in suits battles of, you know, a big lizard punching a big moth and a big lizard punching an extra from the Beastie Boys Intergalactic.
The effects got worse. That's the strange thing about the series. The effects got worse.
Yes. There's some okay effects working here, even for the time. I think some of the composite work kind of holds up. It gave it a little bit of any replayability. I can almost get behind it, you know, for the time. But yes, it is a very more serious take of it. It's obviously, as you say, fascinating insight into sort of Japanese psyche at the time, and lots of interesting things going on in it. You can pick niggles about how maybe the characters don't quite hang together all that well. It's all a bit disjointed in some of the way that it does the kind of storytelling of that, and that's not really so much of an important flaw, because really everyone's acting under a lot of stress with a giant lizard that's going to kill them all, so I can forgive them that. Yeah, interesting to rewatch this, and it's certainly one of the stronger episodes. It's one of the only kind of Toho Godzilla films that's kind of works as a proper film and not simply a creature feature, so it's certainly interesting in that regard, and you can't argue with the historical importance of it, and just as a history lesson more than anything else, to see the both of the Godzilla franchise, which has endured to this day and will do for at least another film, which is coming up this year, probably. Yeah, so very interesting to rewatch just from that kind of historical film aspect of it, if nothing else. But yeah, I think it holds up as a very interesting film to this day.
Yeah, I really liked Godzilla. Bizarrely enough, I haven't seen this despite being obsessed with Godzilla as a child because of the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, which Drew seems to dismiss so readily for some reason.
Because as with 99% of all Hanna-Barbera output, it's appalling.
Oh yeah, it is appalling, absolutely. But when you're like 8 years old, it's
I liked it when I was a kid, yeah. I'm not a kid anymore, Craig, we've probably noticed.
I was obsessed with Godzilla when I was 8, 9 years old, to the point where like I would have recurring dreams about Godzilla being my friend. And to this day, we have a long-standing family joke, which I think we might have mentioned in a much earlier episode of the podcast about talking in my sleep about Godzilla, and a certain phrase involving Godzilla my sister still teases me about now, like 35 years later. So I was kind of obsessed with Godzilla, but I'd never actually seen Godzilla. And it's very easy to dismiss Godzilla as a creature as a sort of very kitsch, just hokey monster movie series, which certainly a lot of those later Toho entries are, although I still maintain that 1975's Terror of Mechagodzilla is a high watermark for robotic giant lizards with spinning heads that shoot lasers. I've yet to see that giant robotic lizard with a spinning head that shoots lasers be bettered, if I'm honest with you. But it would be very easy, and I think perhaps off the back of how kitsch and, you know, silly and campy those are, I hadn't really bothered to go back and ever watch the original movie, which is a shame. And I know it feels laboured and worn to talk about, it's Japan reckoning with its place in history as the only country to ever been attacked by nuclear weaponry, but I'm at an age now where I kind of, you know, I have moments where I'll sit and just stop and think about stuff like that, and it's really quite profound if you think about it. And people look to art to channel their emotions, and if one considers that this is a film where an entire nation who were attacked with nuclear weapons and so far are still the only nation to have been so, look to a movie like this to try and rationalise the experience that they've had, then it's actually really quite profound and not to be dismissed out of hand. And of course it looks kitsch now, but just that alone lends this film a certain gravitas that you can't really escape in viewing it now. And I did actually quite enjoy it. And I think you mentioned, Drew, the sound design of like the monster roar and whatnot, which I liked quite a bit. I really appreciated the opening credits of this film because it was like really ominous in a way that a lot of modern movies would probably give their right arm to sound. But yeah, there's a certain pathos to certain scenes in the film. There's a scene in particular where he's on the rampage in Tokyo where you see a mother sort of cowering in the street with her 3 daughters, and she knows that they're basically going to buy the farm, and she basically consoles her daughters by saying, it's okay, we're going to be with daddy soon, we're going to the place where daddy is. And you think, oh god, yeah, this is not even a decade after these guys got absolutely pasted in the war, and half a generation of young men got wiped out.
Yeah, but just when you start off saying, like, it's like, it might seem like tiresome to be talking about like Godzilla as this response to World War II and things, but it was less than a decade.
Absolutely. And even now, that's still a very profound thing. You know, we still discuss now whether or not that was the right way to end a war. Because, the targets were not military, they were civilian. So this is essentially an entire nation pouring its soul into trying to come to terms with the experience that they've had. And at the same time, there are other scenes which are, look really campy now from an effects point of view, but the movie plays it absolutely straight. It's not camp in the sense that the later films, would be, where they would just try and pile on the man in rubber suit action. This film is taking itself absolutely seriously, and you can imagine if the modern Godzilla movies were designed and manufactured in this way, they would really be quite something. I think it would still work quite well, but unfortunately that's not what we've got. And if you consider the sheer gravitas at the core of what this movie was attempting to do, and then you look at the trailer for Godzilla versus Kong, oh dear, it's kind of an affront really that it's become that. But this movie in and of itself in isolation, I actually really quite enjoyed, and there are moments in it that are still quite impactful and well designed and well thought out moments of sort of tragedy and terror. Although I would say, when a boat sinks in mysterious circumstances, don't send another boat after it. And when that boat sinks, don't send another boat after that to find out what happened. And when that boat sinks, don't send another boat after that to find out what happened. And so on and so on. But I also like to think that the electric fence idea might have worked a bit better if they had renamed Godzilla Jimmy and had him actually trying to fetch a frisbee back from one of the pylons, which obviously if you were
That's
in
a deep cut.
There you go, if you were in school in the UK in the late 70s, early 80s, then you'll know how effective that would have been. So yeah, maybe you could have dealt with Godzilla that way, but it's a really carbon fiber fishing rod. Yes, or a kite, or maybe you could have gotten Godzilla to try and fetch a football from some train tracks or something like that. But no, a really much more interesting and sort of profound experience than I was expecting. Is it the best made film? No. Although, is it undeniably probably one of the more important films in film history? There's probably an argument to be made for that thematically, but
certainly
yes.
in terms of like against expectation, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, and that's why I kind of made a fairly small part of my introduction to this. It was, I don't want to harp on too much about the special effects because whereas, like, I don't think they're campy at all. I think they are maybe a bit cheesy and certainly quaint, but they're not campy, not in the way that the later entries became. But as I said as well, they're used sparingly.
Yeah, and they're well planned and executed for the time as well.
Yeah, it's and there are some good bits like the animation put on top of the scales to show that he's the gender's never specified in Japanese films, but it is about to use
atomic breath or whatever it is.
Atomic breath, yeah, things like that. And there's wee bits there, and as I said, some of the composite and like even just the like when it begins, it's bad, but when the pylons are along the street to show it's like electric fence at first, it's floating, but after that, then it's like actually no, more or less works. It's weird though. I'm just going to jump on to like what the series spawned, particularly the US stuff. The Roland Emmerich film is appalling. I really enjoyed Godzilla King of the Monsters because that's very much not this. It's more just
Is that the Gareth Edwards one?
No, it's the 2016 one, no, 2018 one, the one that's not terrible.
Okay.
The last one. Godzilla King of the Monsters when he's fighting King Ghidorah.
Right, I've not seen that one.
It's just, well, that was just a really good monster movie, right? And it's like, that got the debate. It's like, okay, it wasn't trying to say anything at all. It was like a monster movie. And so what you want there is to show the monsters all of the time. And it basically showed the monsters all of the time. Whereas the Gareth Edwards one is appalling because it tries to do what the original Godzilla did with, you know, sparing use of the monsters and trying to. It clearly thought it was like Jaws or something, except that all of the time spent away from Godzilla is with the dullest people in the world, including Aaron Taylor. What's his
Johnson.
name? Vicodin or something. Ambien. Aaron Taylor Ambien. It's just like one of the least charismatic people you could imagine seeing on screen, and nothing interesting happens with any of the humans. And people were calling it something of a masterpiece at the time. Like, nope. And I watched it again before the most recent one came out. And like, yeah, this is still appalling. It's a really dull film because they've taken Godzilla out of it, haven't really added anything in to say. It's like not the other film has already said before, and much better. And like, yeah, we've just got some dull humans for 90% of the running time. Whereas this one, like, it's very much not a monster film. It spawned a whole series of them. It's not actually a monster film. Godzilla's just this threat, and it's what the humans are doing, how they're responding, how it came about that's important. And I mean, it's very much. Scott Pauly, like this because of his common use of that Garth Marenghi quote about writers using subtext, but there's no subtext in Godzilla, really. It's all very on the surface, but they're all very valid comments to make. And particularly, again, less than a decade after two atomic bombs were dropped in that country.
Manus, I would also just like to point out, Drew, that for the second time tonight, you've dismissed something quite readily. So, first it was the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla cartoon, and now it's the career of Aaron Taylor Johnson. A career which, actually, if you would give him space and time, you would understand is part of a temporal pincer movement.
So, I'd entirely forgotten he was in that film because he's so...
Weird Mockney.
He's so a person with a face.
Aaron Tyler Johnson from the future is coming to meet Aaron Tyler Johnson from the past, and both careers will meet in a temporal pincer movement.
He really
can the screen maintain such charisma of two such entities on screen at the same time?
He's distracting us now as we move forward in time by being but good Aaron Taylor Johnson is currently coming back through time to resolve this issue that you have in person, so you better watch out, Drew.
He's also in one of the Avengers films in which he is fast. That's as much impact.
Oh,
as he makes.
isn't he in
He's
Ultron?
Fast,
Isn't
yes.
he? Yes, yeah.
He's not Quicksilver in Ultron. He's fast. That's it. That's the only thing
I remember seeing him in it for like 30 seconds ago. Isn't that? Oh, he's gone. I'll never know.
Well, it was fast. So.
He was fast. However, we're not comparing and contrasting Aaron Johnson's temporarily forwards and temporarily backwards careers tonight, are we?
We're not. I'm going to hazard a comment that that's a good thing, and we're on board with that.
Yes.
We haven't made a terrible mistake in the setup of this episode.
Well,